Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Sarah Payne Scarborough. I feel like the cruise director for the week of the Small Communities Big Solutions Conference. We appreciate all of you tuning in for this wonderful presentation. And to get us started today, I'd like to first introduce Heather Vanetta with Appalachian Power. And Appalachian Power is one of the hosts of this conference. Heather is a great resource. She has many, many years of economic development under her watch, and we appreciate very much. Heather is going to welcome everyone and get our program started. Heather?
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Somebody give me a thumbs up to make sure. All right, perfect. All right, well, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Lorie Vincent, founder and president of Acceleration by Design. I've had the privilege and joy of knowing Lorie for over a year. I was able to hear her last year when we at a Stand Up Rural America Summit when we were in Oklahoma, you know, back when we could do these in person. And I can tell you that I have thoroughly enjoyed everything that she has talked about and discussed, and I hope you're going to get as much out of these sessions as what I have. So with that, for more than 28 years, Lorie has developed strategies, prospect events, and marketing initiatives that have resulted in the creation of thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in capital investment. Having worked with more than 20 different industries, domestic and abroad, her knowledge and perspective of economic trends and opportunities is extensive. She's comfortable in cowboy boots and a hard hat or a suit and stilettos. And she has worked with the smallest of cities to the largest of states. And Lorie is a certified economic developer and also a professional trailblazer. And she has taken 3 economic development organizations to the next level. So Lorie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm excited to hear if rural America is ready for the recovery phase.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to be a part of this really great summit. I'm sad that we're not there all together in person, but hopefully we will be all together in West Virginia at the very end of April. We are thinking positive. So thank you, Heather. It was great to meet Heather last year at our summit. So she knows I'm a total evangelist when it comes to growing rural America. And today what I wanted to visit with you about is 2 things. And I told Sarah before we started, I do have a handout for this presentation, so no need to take notes or anything. I will send it to her this afternoon and she'll put it in the portal. But I kind of wanted to set up today, what we're going to talk about is 2 things. Before the pandemic, what people were looking for when they chose where to live and work. And that will kind of set up our conversation for how things have changed this year. And now some things to be thinking about as we begin to hopefully come out of, to rebound and rebuild and revitalize as we come out of the pandemic, because rural America is going to have some opportunities and challenges. And I wanted to leave you with some things to think about today. Mostly, are you ready for it? So let me set it up first by giving you a couple of numbers. I have been tracking the growth in rural America for 30 years, my entire career. From my very first job, I had a board of directors. I worked, my first economic development job, I worked for a county, a small county in Texas. And my very first board, we had just started the organization. So we were all new to economic development. And so they were awesome. And one of my very first challenges was to go out into the country and find some very vibrant communities and counties that were very similar in size to ours, and find the successful ones, find out what they were doing so that we could emulate it, because they really wanted to hit the ground running. And they said, why would we spend years trying to figure it out if we could go find out who's already figured out the secret sauce and figured out the formula for growth, and we would just emulate them. So from the very beginning of my career, I began to identify growing rural communities. And the interesting thing was every year, so at first I identified 7 or 8 from our state and just from surrounding states. And then I began to go out a little further, and every year I began to add 10 or 15 more communities to that list. And now I have about 500 cities that I've been monitoring over the last 30 years. Well, what we have found and what I'm very interested in are the trends and what we see happening in the country that are tangible things, that are intangible things, things that we can control, things that are out of our control. And because I believe that if we identify those things, if we identify the factors, and like I said, kind of that secret sauce or the combination of things that will help a community grow, then we can build initiatives and strategies to move that train forward. If we don't know what those things are, how could we possibly, build those into a blueprint for growth? So that, it's become not just a hobby, but it's been very instrumental, that information throughout my career. Well, when I started my own firm a couple of years ago, while I still have a lot of urban clients and I still work with site selectors, I still, I'm very much a traditional economic developer still, but my heart is with rural America. That is my passion. I started this so that I could begin to work with those communities and really implement those strategies. But as I said, we have to be able to benchmark where we are, identify what our needs are, and what our opportunities are before we can really build those initiatives for growth. So with all of that said, I started noticing at the end of 2018, through my conversations with a lot of the growing communities, and as well as statistics from the Census Bureau and some other urban areas, we began to see that after years of our population leaving rural America and going to the more urban areas, to suburban areas and urban areas, we saw it at the beginning of 2018 began to level out a little bit. The last quarter of 2018, it was almost even. And the first quarter of 2019, which was the first quarter before we had our summit last year, we actually, now this was not a big upswing or downswing, but that's huge for us. If for the first time in 4 decades, people weren't leaving our communities to go to the urban areas. Our kids weren't leaving. We were starting to have jobs and opportunities in our rural communities that would allow people to live and work where they wanted to live and work. Now, y'all, this happened before the pandemic. We saw this trend. We saw it in the first quarter, then we followed it through the second quarter and the third quarter of 2019. We don't have any numbers since that time, but I think we can all tell that those numbers are going to continue at a very, very small pace, maybe a little bit more now, but it was at a very, very small pace, but still really good news for us that we were going to have the opportunity to build our populations again, to create those jobs again, and to revitalize our communities in ways that we had not really been, or at least without the challenge of that sucking vacuum of population leaving our communities and going to the metro areas. So that happened in 2019. So let me set up these couple of numbers for you. And these are in the worksheet, so you don't have to write them down. But I think it's important to put this into perspective. In the United States, at the end of 2018, there were 18,025 cities in the United States under the population of 25,000, which means most of your communities in West Virginia, most of the communities in Texas, most of the communities in our country are in that population range. 18,000 cities in our country are under the population of 25,000. Now, that means we're in good company. Whatever opportunities you have, that's your competition. Whatever challenges you have, you are not alone. So we can kind of find comfort in knowing that, okay, we got to be at the top of our game because we're competing with 18,000 other cities. But also, if you have a challenge, I promise you, 17,500 of those communities also have your same challenges. But let me take it a step further. 16,470 of those communities are under the population of 10,000, which is much more of the communities that I work with that really are the communities that blanket our country, are the communities under the population of 10,000. Ironically, at that time, there were only 285 cities over the population of 100,000. And so in our minds, we think, oh, the cities get everything. This city gets everything. Why can't we have that? Or that's where all the activities taking place. Well, there's only 285 cities in our whole country over the population of 100,000. That number is very hard to believe because so many of those cities are in the millions. But when you think of our 50 states, many of our states may have one or two cities that are over 100,000. It's only the really probably 10 or 12 real metro areas that have most of the population in those states. So I say this because there's power in those numbers. And like I said, we're not alone in our challenges. And a lot of our challenges are very universal, but more so, we really have an opportunity to change the trajectory of the growth and opportunities that we have in rural America. I've been saying that now I saw it starting in 2018. I just began to preach at that point. Come on, people, come on, communities, are you ready? Are you ready? Because some communities are going to be ready. And do you want to be at the front of the line when this trend begins to happen? And that was the purpose of the summit, was for me to say, all you rural communities, are you ready for this? This was all pre-pandemic. And so I want to share with you the 10 things that before the pandemic, and then we're going to talk about after the pandemic. But these are the things that people were saying, and this is across generations, and this is across population centers, male and female. Like I said, it's just a gamut of this survey that was taken, asking people, what are the things that are important to you when you choose where to live? If you decide you want to live in the middle of New York City, do you want to live in Atlanta, or do you want to live in a rural community in West Virginia or Texas or Nebraska or Colorado? What are the things that people are looking for? Well, there were really no surprises in this list, so you're not going to be surprised by this first list that I give you, but it does give you some things to think about when you think of your own community and perhaps the strengths and weaknesses that you may be facing in your own communities. I think that this list is just a good base point for us to say, okay, if these are the things that people are predominantly looking for, if there's going to be no surprises, that's our base point. And then we take that and we can go through and say, okay, check the box. Are we good here? Are we good here? Are we good here? Because once we are good with those basic needs, then that's when you can really implement some very innovative and creative strategies to take yourself to the front of the list. And your marketing and your attraction of people moving into your community and moving job creators into your communities. So this was the list before the pandemic, and I'm sure it's still the list now, although I think a lot of these things have taken new prominence, and these are in no particular order, but I think now, since the pandemic, I will be very curious to see if they actually change the order and place some priority on some of these things. The people that I've talked to have said yes. Definitely where we say these 10 things are in no particular order. I think as we go into 2021 and we begin to look at why people are moving, why companies are moving, how jobs are changing, then I think there are some things that are going to take a priority to people. So the first thing on our list, remember this is pre-pandemic, was clean air and water. And now I can tell you from Texas, this this surprised me a little bit. This just tells you how much I take this for granted. If somebody asked me what were the top 10 things that I'm looking for where I live, because I could live anywhere. In fact, we live in the Austin area, and we have a home in Stratford, Texas, in a very rural community. And clean air and water wouldn't even have made my top 10 list, because I have even lived in other countries and this was not a factor. So this was very eye-opening for me to realize that we all don't have the luxury of clean air and water. There are places in our country that this is a challenge. You know, our neighbors in Michigan have had issues with it. There's places on the West Coast after fires. There's places that have battled hurricanes that still are having, have not been able to rebuild their systems. And so I think that's a very stark reminder that we should not take clean air and water for granted, that is always going to be on people's list. They do not want to live somewhere where there's not reliable clean air and water. The second thing is safe neighborhoods. And I also thought this was interesting that they didn't just say public safety or a safe community, but they want safe neighborhoods. And this is something that I'm absolutely certain that when this survey is done again in 2021, that personal safety and safe neighborhoods is going to turn out to be a reason that a lot of people make a move somewhere, and it could be to another city, but that is definitely going to be a priority. But they want safe neighborhoods, and it's one reason why we raised our daughter in the rural community, because we wanted her to have that quality of life. We wanted her to be able to walk to her grandparents' house. We wanted her to be able to play outside with her friends. We wanted her to be able to walk to school. And sadly, a lot of places that is not the case, but in a lot of our rural communities, we can still nurture that environment and provide safe neighborhoods and safe communities for people. So where that is also something that we may have taken for granted, that now becomes a marketing point as we move forward. People want social interaction and gathering places. Now, Heather can tell you, I am a huge proponent for downtown revitalization. It's one of the most popular workshops that I do, amazingly. So I do understand the importance of gathering places, but it doesn't just have to be your downtown. I just see that in all of my research, that is something that all of growing, vibrant communities have in common, is a vibrant downtown. But a lot of communities may not have the ability to spend resources to revitalize their downtown. So that doesn't mean, though, that your community doesn't still need gathering places. It could revolve around the school, it could revolve around churches, it could be a park, a community center. There's any number of ways that a community can build and grow gathering places, but it's very important for people moving in to see that you have the opportunity, it's important to your community to gather and to build that social interaction. I can tell you, because I've lived in a lot of places and I've moved into places where sometimes I felt welcome and sometimes I didn't. And so I think that's very important that we remember, as we have the opportunity to grow our communities now and welcome new people in, new job creators, new citizens, that we place importance on that social interaction. We make people feel welcome, and that we pay attention to making sure that we nurture some gathering places for people. The next thing is they want vibrant business districts. And that's a challenge for a lot of rural communities that have lost population, because as a community loses population, then obviously retail suffers. Sometimes the businesses along the highway suffer. Population really dictates the success of a lot of our businesses. And that And people don't want to move into a community that they don't feel like there is some vibrancy in the business district. And as these people are making decisions where to live and work, they're noticing that. It's not something that we can hide, but we can definitely make strides to changing our situation where we feel like our business districts may be suffering. Well, then that needs to be something that we focus on to turn that around. But that is definitely something that people are looking for. They don't want to go to a community that feels tired or feels like there's no effort to continue to move the community forward. And a lot of that has to do with leadership and vision. But definitely vibrant business districts. It could be along your highways. It could be your downtown. It could be your industrial parks. We want to make sure that we pay attention and notice that the condition of those, because people pay attention to that. They want vibrant business districts. They want reliable utilities and public services. Another thing that gosh, usually is not a problem in rural America, because we have great utility companies. Thank you, Heather. And all of our electric co-ops, all of our utilities throughout the country, they are the backbone of our communities, and that reliability, we depend upon their reliability. A lot of communities don't have that. And so I think I put that reliable utilities along the same thing as clean air and water. Perhaps a lot of us have taken that for granted, but people who haven't had that definitely is on their list. They are not going to move somewhere where they don't feel like there is reliable utilities and public services, and that would be fire, public safety, first responders, emergency management, that sort of thing. That is important to them. If they're making a move to a community, that's going to be something they want to check the box on. The next thing is parks and recreation. So we're going to talk about this a little later about post-pandemic, but now that people are starting to realize that they have been sent home to work, and perhaps that company has said, you know what, you can work from home from now on. We are going to talk about the pros and cons of that, but if that's the case, a lot of people, especially the younger generations, are saying, you know what, I don't mind working all day, but I really want to go hiking at night, or I want to go fishing at night, or I want to, I want to go rafting on the weekend. And those parks and recreation now, which used to be a luxury, now are actually becoming a reason that people are choosing where they live. Which is great for those of you in West Virginia. Your state is beautiful, and you have so many opportunities to really enhance your parks and recreation. And a lot of that could just be marketing it. But that is definitely something that is taking a new importance. I know my daughter wants to live where she can go do things on the night, in the evenings and the weekends. She loves to be outside. She loves sports. And so she's not interested in moving back to where she grew up, because those opportunities are not there. And so we want to make sure that we understand the thought process of the people who are making moves. The next thing is affordability and cost of living. That is something that rural America really has to offer. We have always had that to offer. We have just not told our stories very well. And we have not been able to say that. What we haven't done a very good job of is saying, not only do we have a better cost of living, but when we don't tell our own stories about our quality of life, then a lot of times people from other areas equate a lower cost of living with a lower standard of living. And that is not a message that we want to send, is that a more affordable cost of living equals a lower, or better affordability leads to a lower standard of life. So we want to make sure that in our marketing and as we tell our story, that we make that a really great, smart asset of ours. Like, yes, we have a great cost of living, but we also have a great quality of life. And these are all the reasons why. If you live on the West Coast and you're, for the $300,000 little bungalow that you can get there, you can get That and 5 acres, you know, 3 times the house and 5 acres here. And being able to show that in pictures and tell your story. If we don't tell that story, that automatic assumption is that, yes, the cost of living is lower, but so is the standard of living. And we want to make sure that is not an impression that we give to others. The next thing is connectivity. And boy, we will never, ever take this for granted again, will we, this year with having to do school and telemedicine and emergency management, all the things that have depended upon connectivity. But I can tell you, I know that I'm speaking to the choir here, but we have been preaching this for years about the importance of broadband access for all of our rural communities all over the country. And I've been involved nationwide in efforts to make sure that we can get broadband to throughout our entire country. And, you know, it's expensive and we understand that. But with new technologies and new innovations, there really is no reason now for, regardless of where you live, to not be able to be connected. Well, now our businesses depend upon it, our kids depend upon it, and our health depends upon it. And it is important for emergency management services as well. So this is what we have found in Texas. I cannot speak to perhaps what's happening in your particular area, but here, one of our problems was bad mapping. I mean, for years we were saying 40% of our state has no connectivity. And then our legislature and the policymakers were saying, well, our maps say you do. And we're saying, but we don't. I mean, you can drive through in any part, you know, 5 or 7 different directions in our state, and you have drop calls and or no connectivity, or your hotspot doesn't work. It's too isolated. But according to their maps, we had almost full coverage. And I mean, literally for years have been fighting this. And we did find out, I mean, we did that this year, if nothing else good comes out of this year, they have realized now that those maps were wrong. They were dated. What we found is that they were using census tracts to identify where broadband was taking, you know, where there was broadband, and they would look. And if they surveyed one business or one house in a census tract and they said, yes, I have service, they marked that whole census tract of having service. Well, you know, Texas is big and a lot of our census tracts are huge. And maybe that business had it, but 3/4 of the rest of the census tract didn't. And so it was all in methodology, and now they're going through and they're completely redoing all the maps and finding that, yes, we have to pay attention now to making sure all of our kids are able to be educated online, that people are able to get telemedicine online, that we have to pay, that we have to update those maps and have new initiatives to make sure everybody's connected. But your community has got to be connected for people to move in. And I say that even more so, not for people to move in, but your community needs it for you, for your citizens. So that's definitely something that we've been preaching for so long, and I'm glad that now it's at least getting the attention that it deserves. The next thing is diversity. When people move into a community, or if they choose to live in a community and stay in a community, is because they want to live in a diverse community, a diverse state, a diverse country. People of different races, people of different cultures, people with different ideas and different experiences that they all bring to the table. They just want to live in more of a melting pot America. And I think that's something that we will continue to talk about. That will be a subject. And what people look at when in moving forward is how a community handles that, or how they absorb and embrace issues of diversity in their communities. And finally, the last thing, which is one of my favorites, and that is arts and culture. Even in the smallest ways, People love having arts and culture in their communities, and it could be revolving around history. It could be revolving around events. It could be people sharing their gifts and talents, but people want all kinds of arts and culture. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be orchestras or ballets. It could just be art on the square. It could be art, community art classes. It could be local choirs or local entertainment venues, but people want, just like they want vibrant business districts, they want a vibrant arts and culture district or atmosphere as well. So that's how I kind of wanted to set up this whole thing of things to think about as we're moving forward. I wanted to share with you that we were in a good position. We were creeping into a good position leading up to the pandemic to be able to grow our communities and to get people interested if we did the right things, if we marketed it right, if we got our basic needs in a really good place. And let me remind you of what basic needs in a community is. And these are the things that need to be running on full cylinder all the time for your existing citizens. And this is what will keep a community going. And I want to remind everybody all the time, because I believe that so much growth in a community happens from within, that I'm a traditional economic development, so I will tell you the best economic development plan will include business retention and expansion, recruitment, and nurturing entrepreneurs. I believe in all three of those things. But out of those three things, I think if you were spending your time and resources, I would say do everything you can to take care of your existing businesses. They are the ones that are the foundation of your community. They're your best allies, your best ambassadors. It doesn't do you any good to go out and recruit new businesses to come in if you're losing jobs out the back door. So I also believe that those existing businesses, they are the leaders in your churches. They're the members of your chamber. They're on your city council, on your school boards, on your hospital boards. That it always makes me sad when a community feels like somebody's got to come in and save them. Everything that they're doing is so that somebody would come in and, create 100 jobs and turn their community around. When I believe that your best potential
Well, it looks like we might have lost Lorie for a minute. I'm sure she's trying to join back in. Just a quick reminder, when she comes back on, we have a chat section, so you can place your questions into chat. And if you're here for continuing education credits, please message me. You can message me, Payne30, privately with your name and email, because that's how we're taking roll. So we will just hang out here. I appreciate your patience. You gotta love technology. You never know what you're gonna get. And sometimes it just kicks you off.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you see me?
Oh yeah, hey Lorie, you're back.
I'm so sorry about that. That has never happened, and of course it happened right in the middle of my big sermon about taking care of your own communities first before recruiting for somebody else to come in. But my whole point is, I'm sorry about, I don't know, technology, 2020. But what I was wanting to say is, when you focus on ensuring that your community has the 4 basic needs of housing, connectivity, education, and healthcare, when those things are being met, then that is the foundation of your healthy community. And then you add the other things to it, the gathering places, the safe neighborhoods, those other things that we mentioned. You become a magnet for other people to want to live there and for businesses to move in. And so that's why I tell everybody, if you can do economic development, all three of those things, that's great. But if you had to prioritize, don't risk losing your existing businesses while you're trying to recruit new businesses, because a new business is going to want to go to a healthy community where the business community is vibrant and working. So once you have ensured those 4 basic needs, then everything else seems to, it's contagious. Success is contagious and growth is contagious. So this is what I want us to think about now as we're moving forward, when I'm asking you, are you ready for what opportunities may be ahead of us? So let's think about how our small businesses have been affected this year. It's been absolutely heartbreaking, heart-wrenching to see the impact that this last 8 months has had on our rural communities and our small businesses. What we have found, once we were able to, and I hate to use the word pivot, so I don't even want to use the word pivot, but I know a lot of our businesses had to become very agile. They had to be more open-minded. Perhaps they never thought about selling their products online before, or perhaps they never thought about doing takeout or curbside service. Our businesses have had to be creative and flexible and agile, but it's been so hard and difficult. And so what I'm seeing is, as I talk to a lot of the communities, I mean, a lot of the small businesses here, a lot of the small businesses in a lot of my client communities, a lot of those businesses are not going to go back to the way they were. Now they've said, you know, now we can't wait for people to walk in our doors again. We cannot wait for that to happen. But they are still going to implement, for the most part, the changes that they made this year, because now they have broadened the scope of their business by under duress and by default, and mostly in survival mode. But for many of them, they said, I'm afraid to go back to where all my eggs are in one basket, or this has been successful for us. We just never knew that we could do it this way. So I think a lot of our small businesses are still hurting, and we want to, especially if we continue to have shutdowns. Even if it's just 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's astronomical for these small businesses and the people that work for them. It's just horrible. We want to make sure that we stay in tune. We want people, I live in a complex. This is kind of what breaks my heart a little bit. So we live in a complex in a suburb of Austin. And as I walk down here, I'm in our theater right now. And as I walk down from our unit, I pass probably 10 or 12, 15 Amazon boxes every day. I understand the need for people to order groceries and do that sort of thing while we were, you know, wanting to be smart and safe, and everybody's health is still a concern. But every time I see an Amazon box, I feel like that is a small business that's been hurt. And so our small businesses now, if they're becoming more agile, they're starting to sell their products online. Perhaps they're finding new ways to do business. It's incumbent upon us, I think, and them to work together to make sure that that is marketed, that people know that. So, I mean, for our small businesses around here, when I see that they are really working hard and trying to do something, I've asked them, if you could give me a little flyer or a postcard or something, I will personally take it around my complex and make sure everybody has it. I feel like it's my one little small part of something that I can do. But I want, as this thing drags on and we're all very weary of it, I think we just don't want to forget about the small businesses that make up rural America. They are our business districts in our small communities, and we want to continue to do all that we can to help them. I'm going to skip to, I want to go back to a little bit on the business retention and expansion. You know, that's my number one thing. That's what I think we should spend most of our time doing, appreciating and helping our existing businesses. But this is the reason why this year it became so important. This year, when out of the blue, businesses are told, non-essential businesses are told, you have to shut down. You have to close your doors. You've got to send your people home. And then immediately, I saw it nationwide, economic development groups, chambers, cities, counties, people, downtown associations, people gathered together and said, okay, how do we help them? How can we provide assistance to them? I know, and it became very obvious with the banks on who they had relationships with and how we were going to how we were going to get funds, local funds, state funds, and federal funds to the people that needed it most. And do you know what we saw happen? The people that were able to get the assistance the quickest and the most efficiently were the people that we all had relationships with already. And so for a lot of communities that don't have a business retention expansion program, and they didn't have already relationships with the owners of the companies, with the plant managers, they had not, you know, the worst time to begin to build a friendship that especially involves funding and perhaps saving a business. If that's the first time you're meeting that company, it makes that conversation really, really hard. And so that's why I've been preaching this for 30 years. If you already had a relationship with, if you already knew every business you knew had already had a conversation, perhaps once or twice a year, you would take breakfast burritos out, or bought coffee for the owner, just to say thank you. And is there anything that we can do to help you? When they need help and you are offering it, it happened so much faster and more efficiently because a relationship was already there. It's really hard for a stranger to ask another stranger for help because we're very prideful people, and we've seen it. And so I want to connect those two things together to just remind you how important that business retention expansion program is. Statistics are showing that the banks that got the PPP funds out the quickest were to their customers that they already had relationships with. And we should take that. That left so many people out in the cold, and they didn't receive the help that they needed. And so that just brings that intangible obligation, I think, back to us as people involved in our communities that care about our communities, to make sure we know them, and that in a time of crisis, we're easily better able to have those hard conversations and get people the help that they need. It's very, very hard when you don't already have a relationship. So, okay, the next thing I want to mention that I want to ask you if you're ready for is the change in workforce and labor. When so many companies sent their employees home, it was frightening for people, and statistics are showing that some people love it. They really don't even want to go back to the office. Other people can't wait to go back to the office. But now we're starting to see a disconnect between the companies who say, why am I paying all this overhead for this really great office when my employees were just as productive at home? But then you have employees saying, but wait a minute, I didn't sign up to work from home. I will do it now for safety purposes, but I really want to get back to getting up and going to the office. We're seeing in a lot of communities the empty offices. We are also seeing companies going in and purchasing in the real estate market, you know, some businesses that a lot of leaseholders have defaulted. It's a very confusing time for companies to figure out. I'll give you an example. My daughter works for a national insurance company that's based in Wisconsin. She onboarded during the pandemic. They have 1,600 employees all over the country. 800 of those employees work on the campus in this headquarters in Wisconsin. The other 800 were already working from home. So when Wisconsin shut down, they sent the other 800 home. So all 1,600 of their employees were working from home. Their productivity has not dropped at all. In fact, it has increased. And now they have this huge, beautiful campus that has a cafeteria, it has a fitness center, has daycare, it has, you know, a studio, it has all kinds of things in this really beautiful campus. And now, but some of their employees don't want to come back, and they are going to figure out a way. Their employees they have surveyed their employees, and they're going to let those that want to stay home, and let the others come back. But it's going to really change the dynamic of that particular business. And I know other businesses are faced with the same thing. And so our workforce and our labor is going to look different now. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to kind of figure it out, but it's also going to give a lot of us in rural America the opportunity to attract people to our communities that now can work from anywhere. They can work remotely, not just remotely in their community, unless they have to check in, you know, once or twice a month or go to the office for meetings. They can literally live anywhere they want. And that is going to be our opportunity to say, well, then we have a great place for you to live and work. And we can provide these 10 things that you're looking for. And so I think that's a two-edged sword. It's going to be very hard. I think I heard them say this weekend on one of the business shows that it's going to take 24 more months before really it settles. But that people who like to work from home are probably now going to have that opportunity to do it now more than ever. Because now, where a boss may not have thought it was possible, now they have learned that it is possible. I'm not a big fan of Zoom, obviously, you know, with technology, you know, blipping out today even, but I think a lot of, there was a statistic that 70% of business owners did not know how to use Zoom before the pandemic. Now their staff might have, and a lot of their teams might have been working for it, but the actual owner of the company or the CEO, many times, or they might have been involved in meetings, but they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to sign up for it. They did not have, somebody had to help teach them how to do it from home. And, but now there's a new understanding now, which really is going to kind of take the shackles off a lot of the people who were tied to the urban centers and allow us the ability to market our communities for that population. The next thing is healthcare. Healthcare now, in the last 8 months, unless it was an emergency, almost all regular appointments have been handled by telemedicine. And rural healthcare has been a challenge for the last several years. Very hard to maintain pharmacies, doctors, clinics. The most vibrant communities are the small communities who have been able to develop relationships with neighboring hospital systems to bring services into their community. But now people are more comfortable doing the telemedicine, and that is another thing that we don't think now will ever go back. Obviously, clinics will open again. We will get back to having the services that we used to have, but now we will also have this option, which is going to be great for a lot of our senior citizens who may just need to talk to their doctor and get some questions answered, to not have to get in the car and go to a clinic and perhaps expose themselves to other illness. Then this is going to be a good thing. And so that access to rural healthcare, one of ensuring our basic needs, it's going to give us in rural America a lot more opportunities to tell and to show our communities that yes, you can live here and you can have children here, and we can still make sure you have access to the healthcare that you need from perhaps a neighboring hospital system or from your own local system. That is going to be a plus for us. So the ability for people to work remotely and then also be able to offer that health care. Also, education is going to be the same thing. I know now, at least in Texas, everybody's anxious for their kids to go back to school. But at least we now know, especially for higher education, that people really can become educated through teleeducation. And so instead of looking at that as this, because it's been so hard this year, I think that when we get out of the fog of the pandemic, that we're going to be able to look at a lot of opportunities to bring education to our communities that we were not able to do before, because now we've shown that it's possible. And instead of it being an emergency must, we will begin to look at innovative ways that we can train people, that we can bring outside education in, and we can also bring a lot of that arts and culture in through teleeducation that we perhaps knew that we could do, but people hadn't embraced. And I think people will start embracing that more now. I've already spoken about the urban versus rural, so I really don't want to spend much time on that, and also broadband. The next thing I want to mention in the last few minutes that we have is that there are, we saw this already before the pandemic, that manufacturing companies were beginning to really take a look and moving and investing in rural America. So in the last 5 years before this year, I had been following where a lot of the manufacturing companies were locating and finding out why they were locating where they did. And we're seeing that now with new efficiencies in transportation and shipping, that a lot of these companies are choosing to locate in places where they're not having to compete with a lot of other companies for labor, where they have adequate transportation outlets, but transportation now is much more efficient than it used to be. And so they're not having to locate quite as close to their market as they used to. Plus, it's a global market now where it really, wherever they're located, things are going to be shipped out globally in many cases. And so what they're looking for is, where can I locate my company where my employees are happy, where my bottom line is happy, and where I can still meet the needs of my customers. And they are looking now so much more in rural America than they ever have before. So are you ready for that? Because that is going to take an even, I think those numbers will grow aggressively over the next few years. Companies are moving out of Washington State, Oregon. Some of the urban centers that have just had issues, not just with health and public safety, but with high regulations and high taxes and other things, where now companies are like, you know what, I'm going to move where I'm happy, where my employees are happy, where I still have access to the things that I need, but can make a good living, have a high quality of life. And a lot of our communities are not ready for that. And so, you know where they're going to go? They're going to go to the communities that already are healthy, vibrant communities. That's why I say, if you don't do anything else in 2021, but work on your own community, getting your community to a healthy, vibrant place, then you will become a magnet for those other companies, because a lot of communities are already ready for them. So I just have to say, are you ready? And if you're not ready, then let's figure out a way to get you ready for sure. And then something, finally, I kind of want to close with these last few points. It does not cost us anything to tell our story anymore. And one of the very worst marketing concepts of all time is saying that you are somebody's best kept secret, or if you're West Virginia's best kept secret, or your county's best kept secret, or if your lake is a secret, or that was so prevalent for so long, and it's a horrible, horrible marketing concept. So I'm sorry if you did that. It was very popular at some time, so I understand why you did it. But anymore, you need to lay it all out there, everything that is absolutely awesome about your community. If you say, well, I don't know, we don't have any money for marketing, you don't, well, yeah, everybody needs money for marketing, everybody's marketing, but you can do so much now for free with social media. It does not, I have seen high school kids put together fabulous websites. It's just a matter of making it a priority. But everything, if you were to make a list of all the reasons why you live in your community, then that should be a message that goes out to the world. If you say, you know what, I love to go to work during the week. My kids love to go to school here. We love our church on Sunday. We do sports on Saturday, and we live 20 minutes from the lake. And all of those reasons, you know, perhaps you live 15 minutes from your parents, or you say, well, you know, I grew up here, but I left, but I came back when I wanted to raise my family. Whatever reason you have for choosing to live where you live, that is part of your story. And imagine everybody in your community having their own story about why they live there, and making a very aggressive, coordinated effort to get that story out on social media is very important, because they can't move there if they don't know about you. And your CVBs do a great job. I mean, obviously, I have done a lot of research on West Virginia the last few years when I was trying to decide where to have my summit. And your state is beautiful, and you have so many assets. And I was easily able to find out some, and others have been pleasant surprises when I was there. And so there are some gaps in marketing that all of us can do in our own communities that will tell our story about why you want to live there. Now, a lot of our communities have been really creative, and there's a lot of ingenuity going on this year as we figure out, how do we protect our small businesses? How do we thank our essential businesses? How do we help the people who are struggling with food, with rent, with all of those things? That is what makes up the fabric of your community. And that is also part of your story, how you're going to come out of this. And so I think, Sarah, I think we're going to have a few minutes for questions, but I want to leave you with this thought. If you can't wait to leave, if you're not happy in where you live, if you're able to identify the things that are missing, the things that you're looking for, to please share that with somebody else. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that everybody loves where they live, although statistics show that 75 or 80% of people are choosing to live where they live. If you aren't, if there is something missing, please share that with somebody in your community that can take that and help create a vision around perhaps checking that box. Because if you feel that way, probably other people feel that way as well. More importantly, if you love where you live, like I love where I live. I love where my daughter lives, and we'll probably end up living there someday. I don't know how many places I'll end up living, but I can tell you all the reasons why I love where I live. And if I love that, then obviously other people love that as well. And that needs to be part of your story. We do not have the luxury of waiting. We don't have the luxury of waiting for somebody to come in and be our hero, because our community is filled with heroes. It's just a matter of saying, okay, this pandemic's end. This is not a new normal. I think things happen this year that will continue. Other things will get back to the way they were. I firmly believe that. We don't know when, but we have seen that with history, with pandemics through history, and vaccines, and how a nation responds to that. But I will tell you, before the pandemic, rural America was about to have an opportunity to really capture and grow. Capture population and capture that growth. And coming out of the pandemic, we are going to have even more opportunity. And so the message that we were saying, are you ready, in 2019 is even more important now, is are you ready? But first, take care of your own home, take care of everybody in your own home, then your neighborhood, then your community, and then you will become a magnet for people who are looking for a place to go. So I will end with that. Sarah, if anybody has any questions, we can chat for a little bit. And like I said, some of these numbers that I threw at you are in the worksheet that I will share with you later.
Well, that's great, Lorie. Thank you for your presentation. It was quite impressive. And we do have a couple questions coming in.
Good.
One individual wrote, Lorie, I recently moved back to my hometown in Southern West Virginia after 26 years out of state in various cities. What are your recommendations for finding ways to bring what I've learned while away to help empower my community to embrace change and growth?
Oh, that is so good. Oh, and you know, I wish every community that had people like that left and experienced the world and experienced really great things would come back and share that with their communities. The first thing that I would definitely encourage is to take a leadership role in the community, whether it is getting involved in committees, getting involved in boards, perhaps even running for city council, or putting yourself in a position of influence where even if at first you just softly share your story of this is why I left, but this is why I came back. But where I lived, these good things happened, and if we implemented those things here, our community would be an even more vibrant community and allow us to continue to grow our population. I think it's just a matter of articulating that. A lot of people just, they leave and they come back, but then they never talk about it. They don't ever share that story. And so I would encourage you, even if you don't want to perhaps serve in public service or run for the council or whatever, it could be just sharing things on your social media account that you love about your community coming back, and then perhaps throwing out some soft suggestions like, hey, I used to live here and they did this and it worked. Is anybody in the community maybe interested in that? And if so, perhaps you get 2 or 3 or 4 or 10, 20 people who say, yeah, that's a great idea. And so I think that you can come at it with a hammer, or you can come at it with a little teeny tiny nail. And, but I promise you, what you're thinking, other people may be thinking the same thing. It just is a matter of somebody saying that first. I share anybody's trepidation in thinking, well, nobody wants to hear what I have to say, because small communities are notorious for not being open-minded and not being receptive to change. I'm not naive in that regard. And in fact, most of my clients, the very reason that they hire me, so I can come in and say the hard stuff and say some things to a community because I have no baggage or history. And oftentimes, I think we all together collectively need to get, find a way to have those positive conversations, and especially if you go into a conversation saying, wow, I love this community so much that I came back, but, I think there's some things that we can do that would be of interest to other people that I loved about where I used to live. And I think if you say it in a positive way and in a soft way, then you will probably slowly build your kind of your circle of influence, where other people go, yeah, maybe we should look into that. And I just think telling that story is very important. So please reach out in whatever way you're comfortable and do something, because doing nothing is just, it's not acceptable anymore. Doing nothing is no good.
Okay, so there is, I agree. Telling your story, I mean, it's a must. And we all need to do a better job of it, in a sense of, it's not, I think in West Virginia, you have this culture, like if I tell my story, I'm bragging. And that's not the case. You're just, you're telling what you love and what you know. So the next question is oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah, let me just follow up one more thing with that. Remember that they say in business that you may have one or two unhappy customers and they speak the loudest, because your happy customers never say anything. It's only a naysayer or a complainer or a whiner that seems to have the loudest voice. And a customer, may say, well, I have 500 customers and I only have one unhappy one, but that one unhappy one seems to have the loudest voice. Well, you need the other 499 to speak up and say, wow, this is a great business and this is why. And I think that's why we just we need to look at bringing new ideas to the community as a positive thing. And like I said, I think if it's done softly, then I think you will quickly find other people agree.
No, I couldn't agree more. And actually, I started this in 2020. As I make once a week, I have to call a manager of a business or about a positive experience. And so it's just like something that I've put on myself. Because you're right, so many naysayers, you only hear the bad. I worked food service all the way through college, and you only hear the bad. So if I have a good meal and takeout, I make it a point to call and say, hey, I just want to thank you. Takeout was great tonight.
Right.
Because it goes a long way, and we all need to be celebrators and lift each other up. And this is what this conference is all about too.
Perfect.
So, moving on to the next question, it's Lorie, you mentioned at the beginning of your talk about leadership. How can we encourage our leadership to change old mindsets?
Okay, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think that just goes right into what we were just talking about in finding the soft ways to kind of infiltrate some messages into the old guard. I know when I started my very first job, and I had moved to a small town it was not my town, it was my husband's town. And everybody told me, you'll never get anything done unless the people at the coffee shop put their stamp of approval on it. And I didn't even understand what that meant, because I had moved from the city, and I'm like, what do you mean? I have to go to the coffee shop? And they were like, oh, well, they're not going to let you just be part of the coffee clique. We're just saying you need to know that the powers, that's where things happen and don't happen. Well, to me, that was just so unacceptable. I was like, so I started going to the coffee shop, and they didn't like it, and they wouldn't let me sit with them. So I would just sit at a table by myself. And eventually I guilted them into talking to me more. And over time, it's not that I wanted to condone that they had so much influence, this group that met for coffee every morning. I just started slowly sharing ideas with them, but I also started calling them out in a way where they would say, well, we've done that before. And I'd say, well, not since I've been here, we haven't. Or they'd say, well, we did that and it didn't work. They always had an answer, and I always had an answer back for them. And I'd say, well, let's take a look at it again, but in a different way. And then I had to buy so many cups of coffee, because I kind of made it a habit of, if I called somebody out in a nice way, in a very gracious way, that I would always buy their coffee that day. But it became kind of a joke. But I do think that once again, we can't just speak from the sidelines. We have to, well, for one thing, have your thoughts ready and articulated, so that when you do get the opportunity to have the conversations about change, about things that can be done differently, that you're ready for it and you have your talking points ready. And but the leadership thing, I recognize that is literally one of the hardest things about growing in a small town. I think it takes fortitude and tenacity, and to not give up when at first they may not give you or your position much credence. I think it just takes a lot of, well, this is important to me and this is important to my neighbors, and this is why, and not make it personal. That's the number one thing in small communities, that we have to remember that that when we have a conversation with somebody, it's not personal, it's for the betterment of the community. But I see a lot of conversations or a lot of efforts fail because they didn't have either backup or talking points or kind of have a reasoning behind it. So it kind of just gets poo-pooed off. But for those that say, you know, really wish we would think about this, and especially the hardest things, I think, for leadership is when somebody approaches them with an idea that actually is going to cost money. Their first thought is, we can't afford it. We don't have the resources for it. And so I think the more homework you've done and the more education that you're able to provide to them on how your idea or how this avenue could change for the betterment of the community, then slowly you will get people to listen to you. But it does take, it takes a lot of guts and fortitude. But that I'm telling you, when I research all these communities and I say, what is the one thing that these communities all have in common? It's that they have active leadership. They may not always be on the same page. That doesn't happen anywhere. But they have active leaderships, which means they're constantly listening and discussing and deciding, and they're always having these visionary conversations about where to go next. And if you can get the different groups in your community, they all don't have to be in the same lane, but all going in the same direction, that is when the progress really takes place. Another thing, and I'll just close with this one thing on that question. I have examples of a lot of leadership programs that communities offer, and a lot of those communities have had a lot of success once they've implemented. Sometimes the economic development sponsors it, sometimes it's a chamber, sometimes it's the city, could be the extension service. It doesn't really matter who kind of facilitates it, but I have the curriculum. I have a lot of samples of different leadership programs, from a very small program to a pretty big program that really focuses on rural communities and rural leadership. And I'm happy to share those. And in fact, I will include a couple of synopsises of those with my handout for Sarah. So I'm telling you, people, don't ever reinvent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel. If there is something out there that we can share that will help each other, I am happy to share it. And so I think a lot of it is in your message, having the fortitude to infiltrate yourself into the powers of influence, and then perhaps even thinking about implementing some leadership programs in your community may help drive that community to be more open-minded to change.
Well, thank you so much, Lorie. We will end on this. Can you preview the conference that you're bringing to us for?
Yes. Thank you. I wanted to wait till the very end to do that. Okay, so we were supposed to have our Stand Up Rural America Summit in Charleston, West Virginia at the end of July. Unfortunately, 2 weeks before the summit, unfortunately, we had to postpone it because of regulations and size, or limits on size. But we we completely just moved the whole summit to the last few days of April 27th through the 29th. It will be held at the Embassy Suites in Charleston, and then we have a very big event one night, a Celebrate Rural America event out at JQ Saltworks on Wednesday night. But I have 17 speakers coming in from all over the country, and they're fantastic. And they're going to be talking about everything from local leadership, influence, downtown revitalization, marketing, using technology, housing, you name it. If it's an important rural topic, we will be covering it at the summit. And I actually had 18 RFP cities responded to our RFP on where to have the summit. And it was a very, very hard decision, but we were so excited when we chose West Virginia to have the summit this time. I knew in my heart that it was the right place to have it. And I did not lose one speaker from moving it from July till April. Everybody is very, very excited and engaged, and super excited to come to West Virginia. So we expect several hundred people, and it's just going to be great for us to be with you in beautiful West Virginia. And I'm excited for you to get to show off your state as well. So,
and part of this conference, Lorie is giving one free registration for that conference in April. So we'll be giving that away a little bit later on Thursday on our community.
Yes, we are. And registration is open. We have a room block. I know a lot of people are trying to decide, you know, some people are saying, I want to take it out of this year's budget. Some are waiting till 2021. It doesn't matter to us. But registration is already open. So if people are trying to kind of make that budget decision, you can, you have the option. And yes, we're giving away free registration for people at this summit. So
that's wonderful. So thank you so much, Lorie, coming on and sharing your expertise. It's been a great hour and 15 minutes, but our time has now ended, and we're going to take a short break and then hop to the other link for our next panel. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.